Hey, good morning everybody. So I feel like it's been a little while since we talked about this bike that I'm riding here. Now this is the Ritchey Outback 50th anniversary edition that we built up a few months ago. And in this video, a proper review of the bike, including all the things I like and the very few things that I dislike about it. Okay, so starting with the frame, this is of course the Ritchey Outback 50th anniversary edition in this sort of two-tone blue colorway. This is a size small frame, of course built up from Ritchey's triple butted Logic tubing, and is paired to a full carbon fork going through a straight 1 1/8 steer tube, which gives this bike that legendary buttery feel. Legendary? Is that a little too much? It feels really good to ride. So we got these Zeta disc wheels in silver. Now these are a semi-budget conscious alloy wheel set, and I've had zero complaints about them so far. Now the one thing that concerned me like a little bit is the fact that these are a 19.5mm inner rim width, which is on the narrow side, especially since I'm running the René Hurst 700/48C Oracle Ridge tires. But so far I haven't felt any of the negative effects of running a really wide tire on a relatively narrow rim. Now these are set up tubeless, but I did have to run the Panaracer Seal Smart sealant, which is what René Hurst recommends, because I was experiencing some of the weeping that can occur when you use too light of a sealant, like stands, on a really thin sidewall. So as soon as I switched over to the Panaracer stuff, it sealed right up, and the tires have been solid ever since. Now I talk all about the frame geometry in my original review of the Ritchey Outback, but just the combination of the frame design, the butted tubing, the straight steer tube, the carbon fork, the high volume, low pressure tires, I mean, this thing just rides super comfortable. Definitely the most comfortable drop bike in our stable right now. It's probably the most comfortable drop bar bike that I've ever ridden, to be quite honest. Getting a little bit of rain here. The Swift Industries Kessel bar bag. This thing has basically lived on the bike ever since I built it up. It's like the perfect size for like stuffing, keys, wallet, jacket, snacks, whatever you want. But it's not too big and it doesn't make the bike feel unwieldy even when loaded down. Now for the drivetrain of this bike, I've been running the GRX RX 812. That's the 1x11 speed mechanical derailleur, and that's paired up to these Shimano R7000 series drifters. And so these allow me to run a fully mechanical group set as well as mechanical disc brakes, which I'll talk about in just a minute. Now I did modify the rear derailleur with the Garburuk extended cage, which allows me to run this derailleur natively with an 11 to 50 tooth 11-speed cassette. Now up front I've got a 40-tooth White Industries chainring, again, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But that combination of 40-tooth chainring and 11 to 50-tooth cassette, that just gives me all the range that I ever need for a bike like this. Now because the range is so wide, I do lose out on some of the resolution between the gears. In other words, the jumps between the gears are relatively large compared to a 2x system. But for the type of riding this bike was designed for, which is basically just adventuring at party pace, this drivetrain has been absolutely perfect. Now for anyone wondering about the shift quality, if you use the Garburuk stuff, shift quality is just like OEM. It shifts just as well as before I upgraded the derailleur with the Garburuk extended cage. Now one of the things that I'm most excited about on this build are the brakes. Now these are the Growtac Equal mechanical disc brakes that were super hot last year when they came out. And these are definitely my favorite mechanical disc brakes that I've ever ridden. And that includes the Paul clampers for no other reason than they cost a lot less and offer essentially the same performance. Now I should probably do a full review on these brakes, but in short, the pure stopping power is pretty crazy for a mechanical disc brake. The modulation is okay. It's on par with the Paul clamper. It just modulates it a little bit differently than a hydraulic brake would, which isn't to say there's no modulation. It's just different. Now if you check out my video on brake lever force, where we kind of went full nerd on measuring the actual amount of force required to squeeze a bunch of different brake levers, I was really surprised to find that these brakes combined with these levers were the lightest lever action of all my drop bar bikes, including Shimano GRX hydraulic, as well as the SRAM Rival hydraulic disc brakes. Anyways, I really love these brakes and I have no intention on switching these to anything else. Sorry, I got caught on this downhill. I can't really reposition my hands right now. Another little climb here. It's gonna sound weird, but this is a bike that I don't mind climbing on. The geometry of it, the fit, I don't know what it is exactly. It just encourages you to kind of sit back and find your all-day pace, if that makes any sense. Like, it really doesn't reward you for standing up and sprinting at all. That's not really what this bike was meant for. The bike is more telling you to just like sit down, relax, you know, chill out. I don't know if bikes can tell you things like that, but that's what it tells me. All right, so we should probably talk about some of the embellishments. Obviously, we went with kind of the classic blue silver motif here. It's a very vintage looking modern bike, if that makes any sense. So all the components on the finishing kit, the seat post, the stem, the handlebars, those are all from the Ritchey Classic line of components. But one of the things that I did kind of go all out on was the cranks. Now, I wouldn't normally buy a White Industries crank. That was kind of the big splurge for this bike. Now, this is a full White Industries bottom bracket, crank set, and chainring combo. I basically got polished silver everything with a little brass lock nut. And that was meant to kind of match with the Garbaruk drivetrain components that I got. Again, this is a Garbaruk 11 to 50 tooth 11-speed cassette. The top 10 gears are silver in all cases, but you can get an anodized big ring in a number of different colors, along with the jockey wheels for the derailleur cage. So I opted for the gold anodized for a little touch of color, and personally I think it came out really good. Now, the derailleur cage I actually ordered in black anodized. I'm not quite sure what I was thinking. I just kind of thought the derailleur body itself was black, so may as well make it look a little bit OEM. But then when I built it up, I kind of regretted not going with the silver one. And so instead of paying $72 plus international shipping for a new polished silver Garbaruk cage, I actually just took the black one off and stripped the anodize and gave it a light polish. And so actually that's kind of one of my favorite upgrades to this bike so far. I think it looks better than like a pure mirror finish, and it's got that almost vintage look to it, which I really like. The full video for that process is up here if you want to check that out. Now, moving to the front of the bike, again, these are the Shimano R7105 shifters. And the reason I went with these is because they're, I think, one of the last generation of Shimano drifters that actually came in a silver lever. And as far as compatibility, they had everything that I wanted. An 11-speed shifter with a mechanical brake lever. Now, these are actually really hard to find. I don't know, for whatever reason, they're pretty rare right now. I ended up having to go on eBay and ordering a used set from Japan. So they weren't cheap, but again, I think this is kind of a key component for this particular build. I basically had to get them. Now, you may notice that the levers are silver, but the hoods themselves are brown. Now, these are custom dyed hoods. Now, it turns out that you cannot get replacement hoods for this particular drifter in a brown color. They're just not available anywhere online. So what I ended up doing is I ordered some replacements off of Temu, of all places, in a bunch of different colors, and then I used this RIT dye morph for synthetic materials to actually dye the rubber hoods. And so again, I've got a whole video on that process, which you can check out in the description. But to me, one of the things that really stood out was having, you know, an all silver and blue-ish kind of build with these kind of big black rubber hoods on the front. It just didn't quite match the aesthetic. Some of the concerns in that video were that the dye would not take, or that it would fade, or that it would rub off, or just otherwise deteriorate over time. It's only been a handful of rides, but so far I'm not getting any of those issues at all. So I'm really pleased with that. The color is still intact and it's not like coming off on my gloves or my skin. Now, I guess the only way to really tell is to just ride it for like another year and then just report back to see if anything changes. But for now, I'm really happy with how these hoods turned out. So that brings me to the seat. I got the Brooks B17 saddle with matching microfiber bar tape because it just looks really good. Now, this was kind of a gamble because I had never ridden a Brooks saddle before, and I've heard a lot of different things, people with varying experiences on the saddle. A lot of people swear by this saddle, while some others feel that it's overrated or just didn't work for them. Now, for me, I'm really happy to report that this saddle is really, really comfortable. After a few dozen rides, it really does break in and the leather softens up, and it's even more comfortable than before. But anyway, so that's the build as it stands now. I'm pretty sure it's in its final form. I really have no intention of swapping anything out on this bike. Now, of course, this is sort of a review, I guess, so people will be mad if I don't find something to complain about. I think maybe the one thing about the Outback frame that I was a little bit curious about, I wouldn't call it a complaint, but it's something that I mentioned in my first video as well. The rear derailleur cable run goes across the upper right side of the top tube, and then it snakes down the top of the rear seat stay, which is totally fine. I mean, it works out with no issues. I suppose my only complaint about that is if you run it that way, you've got this exposed section of cable right along the top tube, which makes it a little bit challenging to strap bags to the top tube. Like, for instance, if you want to run a frame bag on this bike, you've got to snake the straps underneath the shift cable. Now, if it were me and I could do anything to redesign a portion of this bike, I would probably just remove these cable stops on the top tube, for like a super clean look, and then just run the rear derailleur cable on the underside of the down tube. So I think if these little cable loops on the top side of the seat stay were relocated to the bottom side of the drive side chainstay, this bike would be absolutely perfect. I suppose I can mention two last things, and the first one is just the nature of the mechanical disc brake. Periodically, I do find that I have to adjust the cable tension because unlike hydraulic disc brakes, the brake pads don't automatically increment themselves forward. So as the pads wear out and as the cables stretch out a little bit, you do have to just monitor the amount of cable tension in the system to preserve a consistent brake lever feel. Yeah, I know that's not really a complaint, that's just kind of a fact of life of riding mechanical disc brakes. And then the last thing that I'll mention is the tires. Now these are Rene Hurst Oracle Ridge, and these are the knobby version of the tires, which I wanted because I ride this thing equally on-road and off, probably more biased towards the off-road actually, and so I did want some knobs on there for some additional grip. And the thing that kind of gets to me just a little is the fact that these tires claim to have, quote, noise canceling technology, which I think the idea is that the spacing of the knobs, I don't know, is such that the vibrations kind of cancel out the noise. I'm an engineer by training, and so that kind of just bugs me. There is just no way to space the knobs in such a way that one set of waves would destructively cancel out the noise coming from another set of knobs. It's just not possible that way. And so the tires are actually pretty noisy on the road. If you're buying a Rene Hurst knobby tire, you're probably aware that you're going to get the benefits of grip on the dirt, but you're going to sacrifice a little bit on the road. And so I really don't see a need to claim that they've got some noise canceling properties. That is the build as it stands today. I do think that this bike is in its final form. It's definitely a show bike, but at the same time, it's also really comfortable and it performs really, really well. All right, so there you go. There's a semi-proper review on the Ritchey Outback 50th anniversary edition. If I missed anything or if you have any other questions about this build, just let me know down below. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you next time.